best university, I would tell.
Subharti is the best.
Subharti is the best. Subharti is the best.
The Swati is the best.
Subharti is the best.
Subharti is the best.
Subharti is the best.
Subharti is best. Love you, Subharti.
Jai Hind. Dear delegates, let me take this opportunity to invite our visionary Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. G.K. Thapliyal, for inaugurating this webinar. Sir has more than 40 years of experience in defense and higher education. Sir retired as Major General from the Armed Forces, and he is an oral and maxillofacial surgeon par excellence. He has been conferred with several prestigious awards like Sena Medal by President of India and Lifetime Achievement Award by the Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons of India. He has headed the Department of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery at DRDO Delhi and FMC Pune and Delhi, along with heading the maxillofacial team at the UN Peacekeeping Mission Hospital in Cambodia. I now request Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, to join us on this webinar and to guide us. Thank you, sir. To you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mukul. Jai Hind, and my warm greetings to you all from Swami Vivekanand Subharti University. I welcome the distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Rahul, who is joining us from UK, and all participants who are joining on online mode from India and abroad. It gives me immense pleasure to know that this webinar on medical devices and their importance in pharmaceutical industry is being organized by Central Research and Incubation Center of Swami Vivekanand Subharti University, Meerut. The medical devices industry is a multi-product industry producing a wide range of products. Manufacturing and trade in medical devices is also growing quite steadily. Medical devices industry mainly depends on imports, and most high-tech innovative projects and technology originate from a well-developed ecosystem and innovative cycle which needs to be developed in India to promote indigenous industry and to reduce our dependence on imports. And that will, on the line of Make in India, as announced by Prime Minister of India, and self-reliance, that will help us in becoming self-reliant India. It is estimated that the global market for medical devices is over $220 billion. The medical disposable accounts for 40% of the total medical devices market, ophthalmic about 18%, imaging and other medical equipment are roughly 16%, diagnostic 12%, and dental equipment 8%. United States of America, with about 45% market share, is the dominant market for medical devices in the world, followed by European market with a share of 30% and Japan with a share of 10%. At present, the Indian medical devices industry is fragmented into small and medium enterprise category and is primarily manufacturing products such as disposable medical supplies. Requirement for high-end medical equipment are met by multinational companies. Medical devices industry in India is predominantly import-driven, account for over 65% of the total market. Domestic firms generally participate in the low-priced, high-volume market segment, wherein competition is intense. Multinational companies do not operate in low-tech device segments, where local manufacturers are involved in intense price competition. On the brighter side, some manufacturing companies are now shifting their focus from capturing the market share to market creation. They are discovering innovative products for market needs. Medical devices sector in India is relatively small as compared to the rest of the manufacturing industry. Though India is one of the top 20 markets for medical devices in the world and is the fourth largest market in Asia after Japan, China, and South Korea. Although accurate data is not available, an educated guess would pace the retail market at rupees 60,000 to 70,000 crore. While the medical technology and pharmaceutical industries are both essential to health, it is important to acknowledge that the two are extremely different. Medical devices work only if they are used correctly. Their effectiveness relies on the skills and experience of the physicians using them, the quality of the hospital, and many other factors. Pharmaceuticals are chemical in nature and are designed to actively interact with the body's metabolic or immune system. Pharmaceuticals either work or they do not. Effectiveness is relatively straightforward to improve. Therefore, the risks to the body from pharmaceuticals are of a different order and magnitude than the risks to the body from medical devices. There is also a vast difference in numbers and uses. More than 500,000 different types of medical devices are produced globally compared to 20,000 medicinal products, each in service of vastly diverse health objectives. Medical devices range from simple and everyday consumer products such as spectacles, dentures, and sticking plasters, to incontinence and ostomy care products, syringes and bandages to help implants, MRI and X-ray equipments, and pacemakers. The technologies concerned also extend far beyond those of pharmaceutical sciences to include material science, bioengineering, engineering, electronics, software, information and communication technology, nuclear aerospace, plastics technology, surface technology, and many more which are applied across all areas of clinical practice and home care. Research and development models also vary greatly between the two industries. Driven by technology, device improvements are typically available to users and patients within 14 to 24 months of previous iterations. Medicinal products, on the other hand, are pharmaceutically based and tend to have longer product life cycles with improvement measured in decades. When it comes to requiring the same type of clinical data for devices as for drugs, it is worth heightening that unlike in pharmaceuticals, randomized clinical trials are not the gold standard on how to assess effectiveness and safety in medical devices because most devices cannot be evaluated with randomized clinical trial as it is hard to blind and randomize devices due to strong ethical and practical issues in the choice of the comparator. For example, what would have been a comparator for an implantable cardiac defibrillator, and how would one implant a placebo hip? Device impact depends heavily on clinicians' training and experience, patient selection, and the care delivery settings. They varies for doctor, hospital, and country, and is thus nearly impossible to predict with any precision. We therefore believe that real-world data from observational studies performed under routine conditions are equally important. In summary, medical technologies are part of the whole healthcare delivery system, and their efficacy relies on the skills and experience of the doctors, the quality of the hospital, and many other factors, contrary to the pharmaceuticals. I welcome the resource person, Dr. Rahul Tripathi, Formulation Associate, Reckitt Pharma, HULL, United Kingdom, who will throw more lights on the topic and enlighten our delegates and also all the delegates attending this webinar and wish the webinar a great success. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Uh, I now wish to invite our Pro Vice Chancellor to welcome the speaker and the audience who have joined us. To you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mukul. It's a very warm morning. Jai Hind to all. Um, it is very good to know that the Central Research and Incubation Center is organizing this webinar on medical devices and their importance in pharmaceutical industry uh, under the aegis of the University Research Council. And I'm very happy to know that we have one of the esteemed speakers in the field, Dr. Rahul Tripathi, who's the presently in Reckitt and Benkisar Limited, United Kingdom, and previously who was working in Medfarm Pharmaceutical Limited, United Kingdom, who is a PhD in pharmaceutics from Indian Institute of Technology, BHU, and I welcome him warm-heartedly, who is going to share a lot of information about the pharmaceutical industry and the medical equipments, medical devices, and their importance in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm also welcoming our Honorable Vice Chancellor, who just now has given his inaugural address for this webinar, Dr. G.K. Thapliyal, sir, who is always what you call behind all these constructive activities. Is always a inspiration for us all. Welcome, sir. And I welcome all the delegates who have joined the webinar today and who will be benefited with the discussion what our esteemed guest, Dr. Rahul Tripathi, is going to tell us about these medical equipments and the relation to the pharmaceutical industry. I also welcome the
Thank you, sir. Now I wish to invite our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Rahul Tripathi. He is working as a formulation associate at R&D headquarter of Reckitt and Benckiser Limited, United Kingdom. For Reckitt, he worked as a lead formulator in Medfarm Pharmaceutical Limited, United Kingdom. Previous to that, Dr. Tripathi was affiliated with the B.V. Patel PRD Center, Ahmedabad, and Naipur, Ahmedabad. He obtained his doctorate degree in pharmaceutics from IIT BHU. Dr. Tripathi will be discussing the importance of medical devices in pharmaceutical industry. To you, Dr. Tripathi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mukul. Warm good morning to everyone, to all students, colleagues, friends, and all. Thank you very much, Professor Thaplial, our Vice Chancellor of the Subharti, Professor Abhay, Professor Shalya, and Dr. Mukul for organizing this webinar to help the student to understand what is the importance of medical devices and what's the role in upcoming future in the pharmaceutical sector, basically. And this webinar will help to the students and faculty members and to the other students, basically, why there is so much importance of the medical devices in upcoming future, and what is the role of medical devices in this pharma sector, and why it is booming up, because in upcoming era there are specialized deliveries of pharmaceuticals which incorporates targeted drug deliveries, novel drug deliveries. A part of the drug delivery system, there are also adjuvant therapies, which includes like medical devices, basically. And medical device is not a pharmaceutical moiety or any kind of solid dosage form or liquid dosage form, but how it helps the healthcare industry. I'm going to discuss those aspects and how the medical devices regulation coming into the picture in upcoming era. That's also my aim to deliver with this talk, basically, in this webinar. And also I'm going to address what are the regulations or FDA regulations involved, what are the classification systems of the medical devices, and how the manufacturer can register their medical devices globally, and how you will identify like medical devices classification, and where you can obtain the information of the medical devices, how a user can identify a medical devices is legitimate to use, basically. And those aspects I'm going to cover in this webinar. This webinar also help everyone to understand, basically, the silent feature of the medical devices. If you see the pack, it gives a lot of information, the pack of medical devices, and you can directly connect to the manufacturer or regulatory agency with the users of those packs, because as Dr. Professor Thaplial mentioned, everything around the medical devices and the importance, how the medical device industries is booming across the global countries, basically, globally. And so it's very much important to the user or consumer or clinicians to understand if there is any concern or any adverse effect is causing by the medical device, where you need to report, where to go, and how to for the procedure. So those things I'm going to cover. It will be little a little bit more scientific and regulatory around my talk, but I will try my best to concise or summarize those aspects. Basically, I'm aware that most of the students hardly know about the medical devices and the regulation. That's why I wanted to cover those things to give you just an introduction and little bit depth about the medical devices and the regulation apart from the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, so um, the content of my webinar will cover the short introduction about the medical device. And in the second stage, I will cover the general classification system, how the medical devices has been classified according to the FDA, according to the regulations like FDA or EMA in the US and the European markets, basically. And what are the registration procedure and FDA listing process. This give you the indications and give you the insight about the registration process of medical devices like cardiac stent. If someone has used the pacemaker or cardiac stent of some of the company, they can and if they found there is malfunctioning or not having effect or sufficient safety, they can go and check the registration number and find out the FDA uh, concerned person to report those things. So that's why registration is very much important. And the user can identify the registration number and UID numbers basically from the FDA listing process and can report their concerns through email or through the channel imposed by the FDA regulations. And the next is the UDI. So that is the universal identity number for the any medical devices, and how the UDI comes into the picture in the regulation. So that is one of the area I would like to touch in my webinar and presentation. And finally, EMDR filing process basically. So little bit more regulated, but I will try to cover very general as well as a little bit scientific things around my webinar. And hopefully you will enjoy and learn something around the medical device, and this will take you a more seriousness around these segments, which is upcoming future for the students basically, and for the India and other countries basically. So as our Honorable Vice Chancellor said, the medical device is very much important, and there is a segment which describes the difference between the medical device and pharmaceutical industry and pharmaceutical moiety. So basically, the medical device is upcoming future for the industry basically, and there is a key player of the medical devices which are developing the medical devices. Those are pharmaceutical companies, or may not be the pharmaceutical companies, and solely concerned with the development of the medical devices. In upcoming era, if you see the reports, in 2028, the medical device segment will be booming up around 600 billions US dollars. That's huge markets globally. So that's why there are a lot of key challenges and the key players around the medical device area basically. So I would like to highlight some of the companies who are the medical device key player around the globes. That's our Medtronics basically, which is the Ireland-based company. Stryker from the US. This is the one of the major key player in the medical device industry basically. Francis SE and Corporation, that is German-based company. This company also is a giant for the medical device segments and having a footprint in the global medical device area basically. And well known, the Philips, our own brand, but Netherlands based. It's a Netherlands based company. And General Electronics, a US based company. So those are the electronics company, and but they have a footprint in the medical device segment as well. And the pharmaceutical companies I have also enlisted over here, like Abbott, the pharmaceutical company. He's also involved like in the medical device segments. Reckitt Kaiser, from where I'm coming from, Boston Scientific from the US company, and Johnson and Johnson's. So those are the few medical devices companies who are the key players in the market. there is a like 20 or 25 more key players around to the medical device segment, but I have highlighted couple of the key players in this area to understand how the company is coming to the picture and how the market is growing in the field of medical devices. In the presentation, I'm also covering like what the global medical device share basically. I just captured this figure basically to understand how the medical devices market has been divided to the orthopedics devices, cardiovascular stents, IVD, wound management, and diabetic care, ophthalmic. So here you can see if I can look at the gray area, which is quite big. It goes to the general surgery. So many of the medical devices like surgical equipments, surgical dressings, everything related to the general surgery is having a big market share in the medical devices. Then orthopedic devices like implants, hip and joints implants, different spinal cord implants, basically. Those comes into the picture in the orthopedic devices segments. Wound management like dressings, sutures, and bandages, the handiplast, you are well aware, I guess. So that comes into the wound management segments of the medical devices. And of course, if you are wearing a glasses, a sunglasses, that also can be considered as a medical devices. It's if you are going to use to protect your eye from the UV light, basically, and something around the management of the eye care, basically. So those are the ophthalmic devices. If you are using some sort of general eye drop, not the medicated one, that also considered as a medical device, ophthalmic medical devices. And I'm happy to share that I'm heavily involved those kind of uh, areas like ophthalmic medical devices, where I'm currently working with in Reckitt and Benckiser. A part of the ophthalmic, there is dental implants for the root fillings, basically, and putting new implants in the dental care segments. That is also comes in the medical device segments. And a part of that, there are IVDs, pregnancy test kits, toothbrush. Those also considered as a medical devices. So what are basically those medical devices, and what's the definition of the medical devices? Why this is so much importance, and why these small like toothbrush and sunglasses falling under the medical device segment? However, uh, previously it has been considered as a cosmetic or general products, basically. If I describe according to the FDA, the medical device is an apparatus, implement, machine, appliances, or implant, or software or material or related material intended by the manufacturer to be used alone or with the combination for the human being for one or more specific medical purposes. So there is a clear-cut guidelines FDA mentioned. It divides a medical device from a pharmaceutical products, like, so medical device covers basically apparatus, implement, machine, which intended for specific medical purposes. So there is a clear-cut demarcation according to the FDA around the medical device. Uh, what are the specific medical purposes? I would like to highlight those medical purposes over here. Like for the diagnosis, if this medical device is intended for the diagnosis, it comes under the medical device. If the medical purposes covers for the prevention, that falls under the again medical device. If you are monitoring, like if you are monitoring for specific medical purposes like X-ray machines, um, the glucose monitoring kits, basically blood groups testing kits, that goes for the monitoring purposes, sonographic machines, MRI machines, wheelchairs even. So that goes for the monitoring, and that covered under the medical devices. For the treatment and elevation of the disease or injury, that also goes for the specific medical purposes and considered as a medical device. Again, investigation, replacement, and modification and support of anatomical or physiological purposes. To support the anatomical and physiological purposes, here the hip joint implants comes into the picture, which gives the support to our bones or the skeleton systems basically, and it goes under the medical devices segments basically. Supporting a sustaining life in the COVID period, have you seen like a vast a majority of ventilator have been occupied in the COVID situations. So that gives a support to the sustain the life. That also goes under the medical devices because it's a specific medical purposes. So the ventilator and the ICU machines which supports the life support systems basically falls under the medical devices. And the control of the contraception. So the contraception IUD devices, the copper T, the old name, it also covers under the medical devices. And the disinfection of the medical devices. If you are cleaning your operation theaters, if the specific UV light is being used to clean off the operation theaters, that covers under the medical devices, and that goes for the specific medical need or for the mitigation of the risk of the diseases or killing the microorganism basically. That falls under the disinfection. So according to FDA, it's a broad area basically. The medical device have a very broad area, like it could be a apparatus, it could be a machine, it could be appliances, it could be an implant, it could be a reagent as well, and it could be a software if you are using a software like for the therapeutic purposes, especially like if you are if the patient is getting treatment for chemotherapy. So the chemotherapy involves the laser lights, or if this operation is going on under the surgical knife which needs laser, so that is a medical grade laser, and that equipment's still under falls in the medical device. So there's a broad range of items covered in the medical devices according to the FDA. So that's why I would like to highlight like definition as well as what are the items covered under the medical device. According to definition, there's a broad range of the items which covered in the medical device. Now, if we go to the classification systems, so there are three class majority, like class 1, class 2, class 3. Sometimes class 2 have a subclass, class 2A and class 2B. To make it simpler, simply basically, I'm just categorizing according to just three classes, 1, 2, and 3. That will help you to understand how the classification systems works. And I'm not going in very in depth basically to understand the classification system, and that's why I just defining as a class 1, class 2, and class 3. If you move to the risk to the low to high, from class 1 to class 3, the class 3 medical devices sits under the high risk class basically, whereas class 1's considered to be low risk medical devices, and class 2 is still under the moderate risk level. So based on the risk associated with in the medical devices, they have been classified according to the classification system in the FDA. And why this classification system is important, I'm going to address the challenges, why the classification system is important, how the classification system works, what are the examples of the class 1, class 2, and class 3 medical devices based on the risk like low to high. So just remember, class 1 is the low risk class of the medical device, and class 3 is the high risk class medical device. Just remember, that make a lot of easier to understand you guys, the classification systems. So around 20,000 medical devices globally listed in by the FDA, like 20,000. It's very much extensive list with the medical devices, and that's why the FDA classified those equipments or those medical devices according to the classification systems. So basically around 1500 families they have created for 20,000, more than 20,000 medical equipment in the medical device. And in the class 1, like 780 families of the medical device sits under the class 1 of the medical device. 800 families sits in the class 2 medical device systems, and around 120 which families which consider to be high risk medical devices sits under the class 3 medical devices systems. So I'm trying to explain with this summary table what are the systems, why the system have been adopted, like classification systems, what are the control measures, and what are the pathways to understand the medical devices systems and the branch of the medical device. For the risk management, if I already mentioned, class 1 sits with the lowest risk level, whereas the class 3 sits under the highest risk level of the medical device, basically. For the regulatory control, it's very less regulated. The class 1 is. So you just need to go to the website of the FDA, do the self-registration, and if the medical device 1 is considered as a very low risk, you can register your product in the class 1 category, basically. And that's why the regulatory pathway either is self-registration, or you can fill the form like according to the FDA 510K. That's the regulatory pathway for the class 1. For the class 2, that's considered as a moderate risky medical devices. There are regulatory control, general plus specific case, basically. So why the specific case? The specific case means you need to fill 510K form according to the FDA, and a part of that, you need to give evidence of the clinical trials. So 10 to 15% of the medical devices needs to get registered according to the FDA with the 510K form and the clinical trials support data. So that's why it's general plus specific cases considered for the class 2, basically. Now the class 3, which is the highest risk class. So the class 3 is the FDA get involved with the class 3 because that's the highest risk class to the consumer, and that's why FDA most of the times comes into the picture, and it's highly regulated class, basically, of the medical device. And it's regulatory control like general plus special case and plus pre-market approval is needed. So the pre-market approval is the case where the pharmaceutical industry need to register their products before commercializing any products. So this case also true with this class of medical devices, class 3. So pre-market approval is needed from the FDA if you would like to commercialize your products, like PMA. We in the short nutshell, if you will say. So like this class, in this class, the example is like the cardiac stent, and if the pacemakers. So that's the higher risk because the risk level is involved with the death of the patient as well. That's why the pre-market approval is needed. It's and FDA makes sure everything is regulated in this class, basically. The types of medical devices. The types covers like active medical devices. The active medical devices, why the active? It relies with the source of electrical energy. So basically, whenever you give the electrical energy or any kind of source of power, it works. So those kind of medical devices considered as a active medical devices. You can see in the picture like X-ray machine, ultrasound, lung ventilator, pacemakers that needs a power to work, basically to function their medical devices. Those are considered as active medical devices. There is a subclass of the active medical devices like active implantable devices, medical devices that goes around the surgery, and then surgically it can implanted into the your body, like pacemakers, brain stimulator, heart stimulator. So those are active implantable medical devices that also covered under the active medical devices class. The second type of the medical device is non-active medical devices. Doesn't require any kind of support of electrical or power functions to work, basically like cardiac stents that are not active medical devices. So you just surgically put inside your body and they works, basically sutures, dental implant, valves, and the surgical equipments that doesn't require any kind of electrical or power function or battery operated systems. So those falls under the non-medical device types, basically. And then the in vitro diagnostic medical devices that's specifically used for the testing purposes like sugar monitoring, blood group monitoring, or blood test, urine test. Those kind of medical diagnostics sits with the in vitro diagnostic medical devices types. So there are actively three types of medical devices: active, non-active, in vitro diagnostic types, basically. uh, I already discussed there are three classes like class 1, class 2, class 3, and they have specific general control and special control. So I just trying to explain you what are the general control and what are the difference with the specific special control. So in general control, the registration to the FDA sometimes is considered because everything needs to be registered according to the FDA if you are uh, um, selling any medical device product to the US market. And listing is also important according to the US FDA for the medical devices. So general control also covers the class 1 medical device, and any kind of adulteration or misbranding. That's the same kind of scenario. If there is any kind of adulteration is happening, or if the mislabeling or misbranding is happening with the medical devices, so FDA can look into those um, um, problems and resolves. That's why FDA asks every kind of medical devices needs to be registered, basically. And then the special control, where the class 2 and class 3, which are the moderate and the highest risk medical devices, comes into the picture. So they needs to be specially labeled. The medical devices should be, and performance standard should be up to the mark if it's falling under the class 2 and class 3. So there are characterization, the performance, like if the medical device is working properly, if the medical devices have been developed in the GMP area or GLP area, and having the global standards for the performance of those medical devices. And also the special control special control regulations needs post-market surveillance. So after commercialization, how the medical devices working in the market, basically. So post-market surveillance gives idea to the manufacturer and the FDA if it is efficacious and safe for the patients and users, basically. The class one, I'm trying to simplify the class one. So here, pictorially, if you see the class one examples, the surgical gloves, the bandages, again, the stethoscope, the syringe, and scissors and medical equipment, surgical equipment, those are the very lowest risk medical devices. That's why they sits under the class one. And also sunglasses, specific toothbrushes, and even cotton swipes as well. Have you seen, like in the COVID period, there was cotton swipe which has been used extensively for the RT-PCR testings. So if the cotton swab is used for specific medical purposes, like applying for the testings, or for applying any ointment or the cream on the skin, so that needs to be sits under the medical device and should get registered in the FDA basically. If it's general use for the cleaning of earbuds or something else, that not to be considered as a medical device. But if you are applying a pharmaceutical products, or using a cotton buds for the testing purposes, for the diagnostic, that needs to be registered under the medical device. The same is sits with the syringes, same goes with the toothbrushes and the sunglasses. They are simple equipments, but they serve for some medical or diagnostic purposes. That's why it falls under the medical device. Now, just to summarize, like what the class one's general controls. So recording as per the FDA, the filing is needed. Same like they sits with the low risk level basically. And most of the time FDA gives the exemption to fill 510k form to those medical devices because of the low risk. But many times he can ask to fill a 510k form to the manufacturer of the class 1 medical devices. So who exempt for the 510k form? The 510k form is essential for registering your product to the FDA listing, and that's the only form is needed from the FDA if you are registering your medical devices. So do remember 510k number basically, that's specifically for the medical device registration process. So here I'm discussing, I'm giving an example of exempted devices from the 510k form: sunglasses, bandages, dental flosses, toothbrushes. So those are exempted from the 510k form for the registration process. So straightforward, if you made us sunglasses or toothbrushes basically for any medical purposes, and you straight go to the FDA and register your product without filling the 510k form, because those are exempted, so you have a liberty not to fill 510k form. What are non-exempted devices of class 1? So some of the examination gloves for specific medical purposes, mechanical wheelchair used by disabled patients, operation beds, and medical stretchers. So those sits with the non-exempted medical devices, and needed 510k form compulsory if you are registering those products in under the class 1 medical devices. So remember, 510k forms come to the picture if you are registering all those kind of items, like for the examination of that globes, wheelchairs, operation beds, medical stretchers basically. Pre-market notification. So application needs to be submitted to the FDA, as I said, mentioned earlier, to demonstrate that devices at least safe and effective as the legally marketed to the in the US basically. That's why pre-market notification is also a alternative name of the 510k form. before putting those devices to the market, a submitter receives a letter from the FDA, which is substantially equivalent and can be marketed to the US commercial distribution. So, like in the pharmaceutical industry, if you are making a generic version of the any drug products, basically, which sits with the ANDA, which called as abbreviated new drug delivery systems, basically new drug applications. Here, SE we can save in the medical devices, so substantially equivalent. So just like ANDA in the pharmaceutical industry or pharmaceutical products, the SE terms is used for the equivalency of the medical devices if you are commercializing or copying or generic version of those medical devices and putting in the US market according to the FDA. Now, the class 2 examples. So class 2 example, as I discussed, like wheelchairs, radiotherapy, MRI machines, BP instruments, spinal implants, dental implants. So those falls under the class 2, basically medical devices, and those class 2 medical devices have regulatory pathway with the general control or specific controls. So what the general control I already explained, sometimes you are exempted from 510K form, and sometimes you need it based on the regulatory requirements for the class 1. But here in class 2, it's pre-market notification 510K form is required for every medical devices which is falling under the class 2. Some of their the medical devices exempted from 510K form, which like mercury thermometers, hospital bassinets, or AC powered adapter for the hospital beds. So hospital beds, the adapter still sits with the class 2, but you can get exemption to fill out the 510K form. And for the class 2, like glucose monitoring kit, pregnancy kits, those are the general medical devices falls in the class 2 medical device systems. Here are some example of the class 3 medical devices, which is the highest risk class. And that's why you can see from the picture why it is considered as the highest risk class. Basically, like heart valves, cardiac stents, hip joints. So those are the very there needs to be implanted surgical procedure, and stays with the highest risk, because the patient can die, or patient can get injury with those medical devices, and that's why the FDA puts these medical devices under the highest risk class. Basically, sometimes if the heart valve is not functioning, and if the person can die, or sometimes if surgically implanted stents are not functional, they can clog the arteries and the sudden death can happen. So those are the highest risk class, and there are some adverse effect associated with those class. So in the class class 3, basically, that's considered as general control, specific control, and pre-market approval is needed from the FDA. And there is no exemption in the class 3. There's a typo error in the class 2 here. But in the class 3, there's no exemption certification manufacturer can get. And the example of the class 3, like surgical lasers, chemotherapy, those that's considered as a medical device class 3. So pre-market approval is given by the FDA, which should contain sufficient scientific evidence to assure the device is safe and effective for the intended purposes, or for the indication for the users, basically. And this is the pre-market approval, PMA, comes into the picture with the class 3. So just remember, class 1, general control is needed, and you can get exemption. The manufacturer can get exemption of 510K form. whereas the class 2 sometimes 510k forms comes into the picture and having the moderate risk associated, whereas the class 3 has a general control, special control, and pre-market approval. PMA is needed for commercializing any of the medical device product in the US market, basically, according to the FDA. Now, after the classification systems, the labels also important and plays crucial role in the medical device. That's also FDA has also put a proper labeling on the medical devices for the identification purposes to for the consumers and FDA and the regulator as well to identify who are the manufacturer, what are the classification systems, and what are the specific measures the regulators or the manufacturers have placed with those class of medical devices. So the labeling, all labels, either written, printed, or graphical matter on the products, basically called as label. So the term accompanies extend to the poster, tags, circulars, booklets, brochures, even printed manuals in the medical devices, along with the medical devices, those considered as a label. Not anything which is on the printed cartoon. So whatever the leaflet is coming with the medical devices considered as a label. The claims, whenever the manufacturer put a claim that it's used for specific purposes, so that's why the claim is very important, and it should be defined on the labels. What are the diagnostic purposes, what are the medical purposes the medical device is used for? So the claim is very, very important. So in the medical devices, do remember, whenever if you are working with the medical devices industry, be precise with the claims. So claims are very important because in some cases the claims can be make medical devices fall into the different classification systems. Like if you are developing if you are making a claim on the label, that can your class 1 medical devices can move to the class 2, or some if you are making some claims around the label and making some important claims, so the class 2 can move to the class 3 medical devices. So that's why the claims are very important. I'm just giving you an example to understand why the claim is important. Cotton swab, I mentioned earlier, if it's used for like cleaning of ear or just for the any other purposes, it's considered as a cosmetic. Whereas if you are applying a ointment, or if it's used for the diagnostic purposes for the RT-PCR or COVID testing kits, it falls under the medical devices. So this is the example, good example, where the claims is coming into the picture on the label. So just remember, the claims plays very vital or important role in the medical devices, defining the classification as well. Next is the registration and FDA listing. So I will not go in depth like what are the registration process, because this will be too much for the students who are new in the medical devices. So these are some regulatory things, and once you will be involved in the development of medical devices, or if you will be working with the medical devices industry, you will learn more about the registration and FDA listing process. So like manufacturer, who are the manufacturer, who are the contract manufacturers, who are the repackagers. So those are the abbreviation is very much important, and there is a clear-cut definitions in the on the FDA, basically around those those names like manufacturer, contract manufacturer, relabeler, foreign exporter, initial importer, remanufacturer, specification developer as well, or a contract sterilizer, basically. So those considered as a registration in the registration process of the FDA listing for any medical devices. So that needs to be mentioned: who are the manufacturer, who are the packager, who are the exporter, who are the remanufacturer, who are the importers in the US market, and who are the contract sterilizers. So everything needs to be listed on the FDA websites and needs to be logged during the registration process of the medical devices and medical equipments. The process is quite simple. The registration process, you have to pay the user fees to the FDA for registering your medical devices. That depends. That doesn't depends upon the class. It's like around 5 years before, it was around 5,000 US dollars to registration for the user fees, and then they can start. They can register your devices and go for the further checks for your data and for your files, and then it's registered device under the physical address, and then you can get a designation official corresponding address during the registration process. Again, the registration process also involved the designated US agent. If you are manufacturing any of the medical devices in India and want to supply or ship to the US, you need to get registered in the US FDA, and also need to assign a US agent, a designated US agent, or any company to sell your product in US market. And you need to provide, if there is more than one medical device involved in your one medical device, you need to list out the medical devices associated, like in COVID diagnostic kit, the swab, the chemicals, and the coloring agents or the coloring equipments. Those are the separate medical devices, and they need to be listed out under the medical device list. And then FDA assigns a medical device listing numbers to those ones, so you can easily identify the assigned listing numbers. And then owner number assignment is also comes under the registration process, and it takes around 90 days to get the registered on the FDA. The foremost important is the in the medical device segment is UDI. So remember, the UDI, the short term, which is unique device identifier. It's the global identifier, and it provided by the third parties, not from the FDA. So the unique device identifier is needed for class 1, class 2, class 3, all kind of medical devices. Now, FDA issues the rule that most of the medical devices must carry a UDI. This is unique device identifier. You can easily identify, or US official can easily identify if, what are the medical device, who are the potential user, who are the potential manufacturer, from which company is coming to the picture, what are the batch numbers, has the medical devices made under the GMP compliance, those things you can easily identify with the unique device identifier. So it's a good way to identify. So UDI are intended to identify the device throughout the entire distribution chain, makes very much easier to the consumer and the regulator to identify the device. I'm giving an example here, this is the UDI. You can see there's a barcode at the bottom of this picture, which is the UDI number, basically a UDI barcode. So UDI is the combination of the GI and PI. I will explain what is the GI and PI in next slide. So this is the one example of the UDI. So you can scan this barcode and easily identify all the information related to this medical device, basically. And there are more information. Some medical device manufacturer put more information around the label, but UDI is compulsory and mandatory from the FDA. So labeler has to label the UDI and GUDDID, basically compliance. So basically, this is the labeler responsibility to put the UDI basically on the device. And FDA defines the labeler is a person who causes a label to apply on the devices and label or modify. Basically, he has a right to modify the labels and put the UDI number. The device will be introduced to for the commercial purposes, for the replacement modification. So there is a clear-cut definition for the labeler, and here you can see the DI, that is device identifier, and the PI is the production identifier. So in the UDI, you can easily identify device identifier and the production identifier. So that a device identifier, it is the number which gives a device identification on the global trade item number. So GTIN, is the number which gives a trade item number to any of the medical devices, and the regulator or consumer can easily go to the website and identify the medical device, their details, and all around the medical devices. Whereas the PI especially put from the manufacturer, which gives the lot number, the serial number, and sometime expiry date. So those are the product identifiers. So UDI is the mixture of the GI and PI basically, and GUDID is the global UDI especially. Now, as I told that FDA doesn't gives the UDI numbers to the medical devices, so he assigned some of the agencies to gives issuing agency for the UDI number. So there are 3 FDA accredited agencies like GS1, HIBCC, and ICCBBA basically. So these are the agencies which are accredited by the FDA, and they assign the UDI number. So mostly like GI gives class 1 UDI numbers, whereas in class 3, the International Council for commonly for the blood banking. So you can see by the name like blood banking or related to the blood transfusion medical devices, you need to go to the International Council for commonly in community for the blood banking automation. So you can go and ask to the this agency, can you give me a UDI number for my medical devices? Where if you are using a general medical device, you can go to the GS1 and get a UDI number assigned for your medical device. Where to place the UDI? It should be human readable, so it should be readable either by human or by the machine. So it should be AIDC, like automated identification. You can capture easily using a barcode machine. So that needs to be put on label or on the package of the medical devices. And there's also one of the GM, that is the direct marking, is for the medical devices intended for the use once or reprocessing before each uses. So sometimes GM numbers is also assigned to the devices who needs to be reprocessed before each uses. So here you can see easily like the UDI is very much important, and UDI basically assigned by the 3 agencies assigned by the US FDA based on their need basically. This is a small diagrammatical representation of the UDI systems. I'm not going to explain because that will be more complex situation for you guys, but just a clear-cut demarcation, like UDI contains the DI and the PI, and the mixture of the DI and PI basically, and AIDC I already discussed. So it should be machine readable, and that makes the UDI and AIDC UDID basically. So that's the UDID. That's the unique device identification. GUDID, it's the global unique device identification systems. So if you can find this number on the all kind of medical devices, and you can capture and get the more information on the FDA platform, and go on the database of FDA and put those numbers and get the information. So basically, FDA manage GUDID, and it's a public searchable database, and FDA made it live in 2015, and anyone or any consumer or any of the patient can or normal person can identify the GUDID number and go and look into the FDA website and search the information around the medical devices and what the information is needed. I would like to highlight, like, there are 1.6 million entries available on GUDID, so it's huge database. So you can see like 1.6 million entries. So that entries covers all kind of medical devices on GUDID. There is no need of registration for the GUDID. So it automatically, whenever you register your product, medical device, on the FDA site, it automatically goes to the GUDID, and the information will be shared on the public domain by the FDA to make it available for the public users and for the scientific investigation as well sometimes. And one more thing I would like to highlight, like, there is no information of patient related is available. If you are looking for any kind of patient related information or any scientific data or any adverse effect reports of medical devices, you can't find using the GUDID information. So that's the thing I would like to flag. So especially you need to check with the manufacturer or the FDA if you are in the need of patient related information or adverse effect related information. So again, the GUDID information. So these are the mandatory things you need to report to the FDA or register while registering your product for the GUDID. So it automatically covers in the form 510K. So the GUDID information. So it issuing agency, primary PI number, device count, like DI numbers, DI record, FDA pre-market submission number, PMAs, FDA listing number, kit product number, single uses, latex information, MRI safety, device packaging, is it sterile or not, sterilization is needed or not. So those are the things mandatory, and you can get the information in the GUDID. If you are looking for those in kind of information, you can directly search on the portal created by the FDA for the GUDID information. There are general UDI exceptions, and UDI exception, like class 1 devices, there is no need to get a UDI identifier. For sunglasses, have you seen the UDI? No. For the toothbrushes, have you seen the UDI number? No. So that's why some of the class 1 are exempted from the UDI number, and devices exempted if the devices is not being manufactured in the GMP premises, that also goes exempted with the UDI registration. Apart of that, most of the medical devices dire need of the UDI number basically. And device used for the scientific research or teaching or chemical analysis is not intended for clinical use, doesn't require any of the UDI number or registration process for the UDI. So those are the exemptions. Again, for the custom-made devices, the single-use devices, and as well as the veterinary medical devices, doesn't require any of the UDI number basically. And some more like shipping container. Now, finally, I'm trying to summarize my entire webinar with this last slide deck, how the FDA permits to register a medical device product. So there is a EMDR portal, And in MDR portal gives access to the registering of your medical devices. So the device manufacturer or importer can directly submit their form to the FDA using the EMDR portal, and they also can register the device if the device is contributing to the patient death, to the serious injury, to the device malfunctionings like stents, cardiac pacemakers, or those aspects which contribute to the patient death or major serious injury. So you need to flag it early while registering your product. And also FDA puts some time frames, like once the death has happened with the medical device, with certain medical device, that needs to be registered to the FDA within 30 calendar day. If there is serious injury or device is malfunctioning, if pacemaker is not working, if the cardiac stent causing a serious injury or death, that needs the like manufacturer need to register within 30 calendar day. So that's the key things, and that gives FDA more wings to understand more depth about the medical devices for the specific need. And if the medical device is risky and giving a substantial harm, that needs to be registered within the 5 working days. So the supplier or manufacturer needs to report within those set time frames. EMDR is live from August 2015, so anyone can go and register their product if they want to sell in the US market through the EMDR portal, and report the medical device like according to the FDA electronic EMDR portal, basically. Yeah, so I would like to conclude my webinar. I hope you guys have enjoyed and learned something around the medical devices and few example. I tried to simplify my webinar, but I also wanted to give you a little bit insight how it's being regulated, what are the importance, and how it is different from the pharmaceutical industry. And it's like upcoming avenue for the those who are interested to go in the medical device area, and try to explain those aspects and try to touch everything in my webinar. I hope you enjoyed and learned through this webinar, and I'm thankful to Dr. Mukul for organizing such an event, and thank you for the Subharti University giving me platform to interact with you through this webinar. Thank you very much. Best wishes from United Kingdom. Rahul Tripathi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tripathi. It has been very much informative, and you have discussed it in depth. Thank you so much. Now I wish to extend my gratitudes to Honorable Vice Chancellor, the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Advisor URC, Dr. Hirohito sir, the Pro Vice Chancellor, Director Research, of course, Dr. Rahul Tripathi, who has been with us as a guest speaker, all the audience who joined us, Vishalji and his team, Kasji, Assistant Director PPD, and at last, I'm very much grateful to the founders of the university and the management of the university. Thank you so much.